Okay, this first section that we're going to cover in nutrition really gives you a general overview of what is nutrition and how do we apply it to our lives. So the first unit, looking at food choices and human health, really just helps us define what is food, what is nutrition, and how do we define good nutrition and poor nutrition, and what are the implications towards our health. So first, let's start by defining a little bit of the terminology. Nutrition as a science is the study of how food nourishes the body, and food by definition is any substance that the body can take in and assimilate. And when I say assimilate, I mean take it and make it part of who you are. You've, I'm sure, heard the adage before that you are what you eat. That is very, very much true. When we eat a hamburger, an apple, drink a glass of milk, we take those food substances and we break them down into their basic building blocks, and we use those building blocks to make our skin and our muscles and our bones. We actually make them part of who we are. So food contains the substances that we need to make our bodies stay alive and grow. Oops. Food is the source of all the different nutrients that we need to have those body functions take place. So nutrients, what specifically do nutrients do? Well, they have four major roles in our body. One is to provide energy, so we can blink our eyes, filter our blood through our kidneys, beat our heart, breathe, do all those body functions we need to do to function. We use them for building material, like I said, muscles, bones, skin, eyes, all the building materials we need to make those things we get from the nutrients in our food. Maintenance and repair. As our bodies age, as we exercise, as we wear out our joints, as we tear muscles, we rely on nutrients to help us repair those damaged tissues. And then, of course, support growth. We all start out just one cell big and go to 2 cells and then 4 cells and then 8 cells and so on. So to grow and divide from one cell into trillions of cells and then to specialize into specific tissues and organ systems, we need nutrients to do that. The major categories of nutrients listed here: carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, vitamins, minerals, and water. Essentially, what we're going to do is we're going to cover in great detail. Basically, each of these has their own chapter, what these nutrients are and how they function in our body. So these are the major groupings of nutrients that we have defined. Carbohydrates, this includes all things like fiber, glycogen, what we think of as sugar, or sometimes you may have heard of as refined sugars. Those are all included under the umbrella of carbohydrates. Lipids, same thing. It's a very broad category. It includes cholesterol, fats, including our saturated fats, our unsaturated fats. Things that you think of as lipids are things like oils and butter and lard. Those are all part of that category. Proteins, again, a lot of people think of steak and hamburger. There are other good sources of proteins, though, as well, and we'll talk more specifically about those later on. Then vitamins and minerals. We don't need these as in high of quantities as we need the other nutrients, and we'll discuss why. However, they're still very important. But you can essentially get all the vitamins and minerals you need in a day in one tiny little pill. You know this if you take a multivitamin, multi-mineral. But still, they're very essential to our overall health. And then, of course, water. Water, you can argue, is by far the most important nutrient. You can't go more than a couple days without some sort of fluid. So we're going to look at how all these play a role in your body and why they're important. And really, overnutrition and undernutrition are both major issues in health today. We tend to hear a lot about overnutrition, especially in the sodium, the fats, and the sugars, and we see that with the obesity epidemic. But undernutrition is an issue too. A lot of times you will see people that are overweight or obese, but are really malnourished. They're lacking essential vitamins and minerals that they need for immune system health, for bone development, for skin development, for eye development. So you need to have a balance of both fats, carbohydrates, lipids, all those things, as well as your vitamins and minerals. So all of those things are very important. Why this is so important? Your nutrition plays so much into your overall health. It's really nothing to take lightly. Really, only tobacco and alcohol rival the influence of diet on the quality of your life and the length of your life. And even alcohol and tobacco, those are things you can control. What you put in your body, if you smoke, chew, drink, those types of things, along with the types of things you do as far as diet and exercise, are so important when we look at contributing factors to leading causes of death, and just even if people don't die from a heart attack or die from a cancer, it really can reduce the quality of life. So my stats are a little old here, but the trends are still the same. The data that came out in 2011 showed essentially the same percentages. So really, you can see that it's a very powerful tool in making sure you stay healthy. And again, why this is so important now, well, nutrition is always important, but it's becoming a very pertinent issue today because we see how our diets are literally killing us. We see these rates ever increasing of all these health concerns that are completely preventative. With a few rare exceptions, good diet, good nutrition, and exercise can completely prevent these. We see over a third of our population as obese, not overweight, obese, and that's significant. And even more scary of a statistic, 17% of children and adolescents from 2 to 19 are obese, which this to me is even more scary than the adult population, because when we're young, that's when we're establishing our habits. That's when we're establishing what we think are good nutritional habits, and if we don't know any different, it creates a lifetime of challenges for us. So to see such a high number of children and adolescents struggling with obesity and obesity-related illnesses is very alarming. And I have a link here to see the latest stats. Again, I don't typically test on stats because they are always changing, but the CDC has great statistics to show you state by state, decade by decade, where we see the greatest impact of obesity and obesity-related illnesses on our health. That being said, I think it's important that we qualify a little bit of our concerns about diet and health, because not all things can be prevented by good nutrition. Some things are purely hereditary: Down syndrome, sickle cell anemia, hemophilia, cystic fibrosis. There are some diseases that, although good nutrition is still important, you're not going to get rid of cystic fibrosis or sickle cell anemia by taking a multivitamin or exercising 5 times a week. So there are some diseases that are completely genetically linked that can be contribute. You can see some diseases too that kind of start to fall in the middle of the spectrum here. There might be some genetic links. There might be some environmental issues, especially when you start looking at cancer and environmental exposures. But again, with this spectrum, there are some things we very specifically see are linked to nutrition. There are certain vitamin and mineral deficiencies that lead to very specific diseases: scurvy, rickets, night blindness, issues with resistance to disease, very much linked to good nutrition. And then, of course, this middle spectrum here, I think sometimes we use this as a cop-out. Well, not all cancers are linked to nutrition, or not all the infectious diseases, or how much of my habits contribute to my health and how much of it is just bad genes. There is a lot we can do in this range. Like diabetes, type 1 diabetes is completely genetically linked, and you can't do anything nutritionally to prevent getting that. But how you respond to that, if you have it, from a nutritionalist perspective, can make your life much better and give you a much better quality of life. Same thing with hypertension. There's a lot of genes that are linked to high blood pressure and heart disease both, but good nutrition and exercise can help greatly reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, and your chances of stroke or heart attack. So again, just be aware of this overall spectrum. Some things we can't prevent, some things we can completely prevent, but there's this huge range in the middle where good habits overall are going to help reduce the odds of these quite a bit. So just to kind of give you a little bit of background on the nutrients, and again, we'll deal in more specific detail with each of these in a later section, but those first 3 major categories of nutrients I listed, those are what we call the energy-yielding nutrients. they play multiple roles within the body, but of all of those listed, these are the only three that actually play roles in the body other than just functioning as building blocks or cell markers. They actually can provide us with energy. So our carbohydrates, our lipids, and our protein, they can actually be broken down so that we can make energy, so we can do work, so we can move our muscles and beat our heart. Carbohydrates, they provide us with 4 kilocalories per gram of energy. Lipids provide us with 9 kilocalories per gram, and proteins provide us with 4 kilocalories per gram. So you can see right away, lipids by far and away provide us with more energy. Pound for pound, we get much more energy from lipids than we do from carbohydrates or protein. This makes the lipids really the ideal storage molecule, and that makes sense. When people tend to consume excess calories, how do we store those? We store those as lipids because this is the most efficient way to be storing those calories. Let me go back here. Unfortunately, this characteristic, which makes them so efficient for storage, also makes them so difficult to get rid of. If you're trying to lose fat, if you're trying to build muscle, you've got to work twice as hard. 9 kilocalories per gram, or a little bit more than twice as hard. That's how much harder you have to work to burn, I guess, those calories than you would the carbs or the protein. And so now you might be saying, well, what is a kilocalorie? A kilocalorie, or kcal sometimes it's called, is really the same thing as a calorie. Usually on cereal boxes or food labels, you see it denoted as the calorie. Sometimes you see it denoted as the kcal. Usually they write it with a big C, because when the big C tends to indicate the kcal, which is the major unit of measurement of energy. So when we measure, just like you measure distance in miles or volume in gallons or liters, we have measurements for energy. And the calorie, by definition, is the amount of energy, heat energy, needed to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water 1 degree centigrade. So heat is just another form of energy. Energy can't be created or destroyed. We just move it around to different places and forms. It's a law of thermodynamics. It can be kinetic energy, it can be potential energy, it can be heat energy, it can be light energy. So it is, energy just is what it is. It's not, we don't make it or destroy it. It takes on different forms. When you put a gallon of gas in your gas tank, that gas has a potential energy that it holds in the chemical bonds of the gas. And then when you fire it through your engine, you create a whole bunch of tiny little combustion reactions, which create heat and spin the, pistons around. You car mechanics out there know more than I do, but that spins the gears in your car and spins the tires. And we change that potential energy into kinetic energy, and then we also lose it as heat energy. So the calorie is just a way of measuring that. And again, by far and away, the fats or the lipids, those guys are the ones that contribute, that hold the most energy within their bonds, and we can get more than twice the amount of energy out of them than we can of carbs or protein. But all three can provide energy. The non-energy yielding nutrients, the other ones on that list, the minerals and the vitamins, they're similar in that they don't yield energy. They also are needed in relatively small quantities, like I mentioned earlier. But they differ in that minerals are in their most basic anatomic form. Sodium, iron, magnesium, calcium. The sodium in the sodium chloride, the table salt that you consume, is the same sodium that is in your bloodstream. The iron that is found in your red blood cells, is the same iron that makes up your car. So minerals are in their basic anatomic state. They cannot be broken down into any simpler form without causing a nuclear reaction. So whereas vitamins are carbon-based compounds. They tend to contain hydrogen, oxygen, and other elements along with carbon. But the one unifying factor here is that all of the vitamins are carbon-containing compounds. And make sure that you distinguish that. We call them organic molecules. So when we say organic molecules, that we mean carbon-based molecules. Organic foods are something a little bit different. Organic foods are foods that haven't been treated with pesticides or chemicals in the growing process. Organic molecules refers to the presence of carbon within that molecule. So minerals are basic atomic elements. They're very resistant to light and heat. They're not easily changed. Again, you need a nuclear reaction to split these puppies up. Whereas vitamins, they can be degraded much more easily. They can be damaged in certain food processing. Extreme heats, extreme processing can damage vitamin content of food. And another reason why it's best to eat your food in the least processed form available. But again, they're both non-energy yielding nutrients, both needed in relatively small quantities. And we'll talk more later about some of the more specific functions. Minerals in general tend to serve in body structural components in general, whereas vitamins in general tend to serve roles in processes such as metabolism, helping to mineralize bone. Of course, there's some exceptions to this, but that's kind of the general breakdown of vitamins versus minerals. So what kinds of foods do we see out there? I mentioned just a moment ago processed foods or foods that have been milled. I have a chart here. I'll just skip ahead. And this is an old chart I had in a book. I think it's been modified several times. There's something similar in your textbook. I just like this chart because it really shows you all the different verbiage that we use to categorize our food. And you've heard of a lot of these before: fast foods, enriched foods, organic foods, staple foods. A lot of that terminology is very familiar to you. So I like this list to kind of give you a sense of all the different terminology we use with the food. But really the big ones you're going to hear the most, and the ones I really want you to know, are listed here. Staple foods, these are foods that, just like the name says, they're really a staple of that society or that region's food supply. Some good examples of this would be the potato in Ireland. People in Ireland, they have hash browns for breakfast, they have a baked potato for lunch, and then they have mashed potatoes and gravy with their meat for supper time. The potato is a huge staple crop in Ireland, and it really is a mainstay of their food supply. Another great example is rice. Southeast Asia, the Pacific Rim, a lot of the Asian countries, Korea, China, Japan, rice is a major staple food. One would probably say corn is a major staple food in the United States. We tend to have high fructose corn syrup in just about everything, unfortunately, but that makes it a staple food. We see it everywhere. Processed foods are really any foods that have been altered in any way, whether it's through milling or grinding or having things added to them, which actually enriched foods or fortified foods are a type of processed food. Enriched foods and fortified foods, these are foods that have been essentially, they've had vitamins and minerals added to them to make them more nutrient dense, to make them more nutrient valuable. So a lot of, if you look at your cereal boxes, you may notice, Jesus, my Wheaties have, exactly 25% of all of these major nutrients. Well, they aren't naturally that way. We've added all that stuff to it to make them more nutrient dense. So those are enriched or fortified foods. But really any sort of food that has had anything added to it, any milling or processing to increase its nutrient value, to increase its shelf life, we consider that a processed food. In general, processed foods tend to be less healthy, mainly because through processing, many nutrients, phytochemicals, fiber, those types of things can be stripped away. Yes, we do enrich them to a certain extent, but often the processing, we add so much sodium to preserve the food and also refined carbohydrates or sugar that the nutrition per unit calorie does still go down. So processed foods in general, even if they are fortified with some vitamins and minerals, they tend to be less healthy. And we'll talk more about that later on. And then again, of course, organic foods, I mentioned this before. Organic foods are foods that haven't been treated with any sort of chemicals or any sort of pesticides. Again, if you just stop and think about it for a second, just a few short generations ago, this is what food looked like. And you're like, well, of course, that's what food looks like. I see that when I go to the grocery store, the produce section. But imagine, your great-great-grandparents, all of their food looked like this. They didn't have to contend with this. I mean, imagine if you were living 200 years ago and somebody brought you up to this table and said, here's your food. It's crazy if you just stop and think about it in that context. We don't have food that actually even looks like food anymore. Even we have to put pictures of it on a box and tell us what it is, and put little logos and little characters and labels to explain what the food is. And that can be very confusing for people. It's how do you know what is healthy food, what is not healthy food? Even looking at this, how do you know what are good choices here? I mean, yes, they're all good choices in some ways, but some are more rich in some nutrients than others. But then you look at this, and it's very, very confusing to know what is really good for you. So how do you recognize a nutritious diet? Well, there's really 5 foundational principles of recognizing a nutritious diet. And if you can kind of keep these 5 kind of pillars of a good diet in mind, it will really help you focus on eating healthy. Adequacy, balance, calorie control, moderation, and variety. And I have them defined here. Adequacy basically just means you need to make sure that you kind of hit those minimal levels you need to help maintain basic health and body weight. You don't want to go too far over because you can create other health problems, but you need to kind of hit those minimal requirements. Balance, you want to make sure that not any one food is out of proportion to another type of food. You don't want to be crowding out other foods that are rich in other nutrients. Of course, calorie control. Taking in more calories than you need will result in weight gain. If you consume more calories than you need and you don't increase expenditures, i.e. exercise, you will put on weight. It's calories in, calories out. No matter what the diet plans say on TV, there's no magic pill, there's no magic formula. Eating healthy, eating a limited or controlled calorie diet and increasing your exercise is the only way to lose fat. Moderation, again, what the name says, nothing in excess. Even a glass of wine is not bad for you. There's a lot of phytochemicals, tannins, flavonoids in wine that actually have been shown to, especially red wines, that have been shown to be good for heart health. They help thin the blood. But that being said, you don't want to drink 5 bottles of wine after work every night. So all things in moderation. You don't want any one thing to be in excess. I actually knew a person who really struggled with eating habits and kind of got addicted to carrots. And she ate so many carrots that the palms of her hands actually started to turn orange. It was just crazy. And that's an example of, well, you think, well, carrots are so good for you, but she didn't consume them in moderation. And the beta carotene literally started to build up in her skin and make her skin orange. So all things, what we think of is quote, good foods or bad foods, all things should be consumed in moderation. And then, of course, variety. By having a wide selection of foods, it prevents monotony of your diet, and it also provides you with better opportunity to meet your nutritional needs. You might get some simple natural sugars from a banana. You could also get those from an apple, and then with the apple you would also get some fiber. So there's some pectins and some insoluble fibers in the skin of an apple that you don't get when you eat a banana. So by having a variety of fruits in your diet, a variety of vegetables, you hit on some other key elements that you might not get if you just have one type of food all the time. So use those principles when planning your diet. It's locking up here. What's going on? There we go. Oops, we're spinning a little bit. Give me a minute here. This seems to be loading slow. I don't know what's going on here. Uh-oh. There we go. I think we're back. Maybe not. There we go. So what sorts of things influence lifestyle choices? Well, there's a lot of things that influence lifestyle choices, but just to define a few, you've heard some of these terms before, so I just want to make sure that you know what they mean. A carnivore, this is not, humans are not carnivores, but just to give you the sense of where some of these other words come from, it's important to define carnivore. A carnivore is an animal that only consumes the meat of other animals, like a lion eating a water buffalo. So a completely meat diet is what a carnivore is. Humans are what we call omnivores, so you can see where the similarity of names comes from. A person who eats both plant and animal origin substances for food, including animal flesh. So if you have a steak, you have a hamburger, you have chicken breast, those are animal flesh types of foods. And then a salad, a fruit, a vegetable, those are of plant origin. So humans have the ability to process both plant and animal products. So we are considered omnivores digestively. Now there are people that choose to have different types of diets based on that and exclude animal flesh from their diet. And if you exclude animal flesh from your diet and only eat animal products like eggs, cheese, things like that, milk, and then exclusively stay on just the fruits and vegetables, you'd be considered a vegetarian. Occasionally vegetarians will still identify themselves as vegetarian and maybe eat fish or occasionally chicken and still claim that status. Again, how you define yourself is how you define yourself, but vegetarian by definition really does not consume animal flesh. An even more strict diet would be a vegan, which is kind of a subset of being a vegetarian. Not only do vegans not consume animal flesh, they don't eat any animal products. So now think about that. Not only not any meat, but no eggs, no milk, no yogurt, no cheese. These people are the ones who would most likely struggle with an iron deficiency. A lot of our animal products, a lot of our animal flesh contains high levels of iron. And so vegans, it's a very, very healthy diet if it's done correctly. But again, you limit variety when you're a vegan. And so it might be hard to get the iron you need. But I know several vegans who are very healthy, but you just have to really pay attention. A lot of beans, a lot of kidney beans, a lot of lima beans, a lot of garbanzo beans. You have to really look for foods, plant foods that have iron in them. And there's just not as many options for iron-rich foods when you're cutting out all the meats and all of the animal products. But it's still, again, if you do it right, it can be a very healthy diet, and you can meet those iron needs. And other reasons we choose food. Some people specifically choose a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet for health reasons, religious reasons. But I've made a list here to kind of get you thinking about it. Why do you eat what you eat? A lot of us will attach cultural or social meaning to foods. My heritage is very Scandinavian. So I eat rumagret and lefse and lutefisk. Some of you are like, what are those things? Well, those are very Scandinavian type dishes. Others of you might eat certain types of Hispanic dishes or certain types of Somali dishes or certain types of, there's lots of different types of breads and ways meat is prepared. Goat is something I've never tried, but I have a lot of students who say, oh yeah, I eat goat all the time. So we attach cultural and social meanings to our foods, and we carry those traditions from our parents and our grandparents with us in making those food choices. And then, of course, the things that are probably really driving the obesity epidemic today, convenience, advertising, availability, economy. Fast food is cheap, it's convenient, and it's everywhere, and it's in your face. Everyone knows what McDonald's is, and everyone knows where there's a McDonald's. And again, those are personal choices that you are free to make, but I think it's important to just be aware why you're making those choices, and is it really economical for you when you think of the impact on your health? So we have all these personal choices that we make, but those choices do drive our overall quality and length of life. So think about it next time you pick up your next meal and why you're eating it. What drove you to pick that up? The last thing I want to talk about in this section is, I mentioned in the beginning, what is nutrition and what is it the study of? It is a science. Nutrition is a science just like biology or chemistry. And I think it's important, especially this being a general science class where a lot of people haven't taken a lot of science, to understand what science is and what it isn't when we are analyzing information about food. So how do we define science? Science is a way of analyzing information about the world around us, whether it's chemistry, biology, physics, or food. Science can't answer questions about faith, aesthetics, opinions. It can't tell you things like God exists, or Jesus is my savior, or Allah is great, or the picture is pretty. Those things are based in belief, they're based in faith, they're based in opinion. You might think somebody is attractive, I might not. And there's no way to, support that with empirical evidence. People have different preferences, people have different religious beliefs, and so it doesn't work when you try to use science to answer questions about faith. It really undermines the idea of what faith even is. Faith is, by definition, believing without seeing, believing something without proof. And that's not what science does. So really comparing science, or when you see people trying to use science to answer questions about faith, it really takes away from the essence of what faith is. Not only can it not be done, but it really undermines the idea that faith is a belief. So remember that when you're applying science to the world around you, it's using objective empirical evidence to support an idea or support an answer to a question about the world around you. We try to stay away from saying prove or disprove in science. Lots of times I'll even slip up and say, well, this supports this, or this. We try to say more, this supports this hypothesis, or we reject this hypothesis, because nothing is ever proven. Even gravity, which we know we have tons of support for, we also know there's circumstances when you're in outer space where gravity doesn't exist. So we don't just say, oh, we've proven gravity is a constant. Well, it's not always a constant, so we always just say we support or we reject a hypothesis. We never say anything's really proven, because we always are, that assumes we've answered all questions, and so we just constantly either support a hypothesis or we reject it. When you come up with a question about the world around you, why when I eat candy do I keep getting cavities? Well, I'm going to test that statement. The sugar in candy is what's causing cavities. That's taking a question about my world and turning it into a testable statement. And we call that our hypothesis. So a hypothesis is a question about the world around us that we've turned into a statement, a testable statement, that we can either say, yes, it's the sugar that's causing it, or no, it's not, and that we can set up an experimental design to test that. So a hypothesis is really hasn't been really heavily supported yet. When you hear the word theory used in science, and again, I like to point this out because a theory in science is different than when you hear the word theory in layman's terms. A conspiracy theory, or the theory of the second gunman on the grassy knoll with the Kennedy assassination. People will say, well, that's a theory. They kind of toss it around lightly. But in science, a theory is essentially a hypothesis that has withstood the test of time. It's been tested multiple different ways by multiple different people, and it is basically as close as you're going to get to fact. The germ theory of disease, the cell theory of life, the theory of gravity, the theory of evolution. These are things that have been supported by multiple people testing it multiple different ways. So a theory is very, very solid, whereas a hypothesis is really something we're in the process of testing. And this is the overall arching process that you see scientists use. They make observations about the world around us, and they ask themselves a question, and from that they formulate that, like I said, that hypothesis or that testable statement, and they use that to make a prediction about what they're testing. Well, I'm going to test it this way. I'm going to control for variables, and if I get these results, it supports my hypothesis. If I get other results, it rejects it. Experimental designs, again, you try and design a study. You try and design a study. Oh, there we go. You try and design a study that really only test the statement that you're looking at. Like I had mentioned, I keep eating candy and I keep getting cavities. My statement was going to be the candy and the sugar in the candy is what's causing the cavities. That's a better hypothesis than saying eating candy causes cavities, because, well, if I try and control for eating candy, what about all the sugary sodas? What about all the sugary juices? You can already see there's other issues. What does my experimental design look like? What am I testing, boys or girls? What age? What does their initial dental hygiene look like? Are they brushing their teeth? So you can see how there's a lot of variables that contribute. I mean, we know that the bacteria that grow in your mouth, can metabolize the sugars from the food you eat and cause cavities. But you can see very quickly how you need to control for all these different things to confirm that. Again, try to use as much large study groups. Try to use large periods of time. Looking at someone's tooth health after a couple weeks might not be conclusive enough. Try to use mathematical data whenever possible. Don't say, well, that color is red. What's red to you might not look red to me. Measure the wavelength of the light that's creating the red color. That's 560 nanometers wavelength of light. Mathematical data is more objective when you have numbers. It's universal. It's easier to interpret data. And then you either support your hypothesis or you don't support it based on interpretation of your results. Sometimes when you don't support your hypothesis, maybe you go back and reformulate it to be more specific so you can control better for those variables. Again, if you support your hypothesis, over time that will integrate into a theory. And when you look at research articles, you see when you look at a real peer-reviewed research article that it's supported by many, many studies. A well-written journal article will have hundreds of citations of other researchers. When you see these things on TV, these infomercials where someone's got a white coat on and they're, MD behind their name, you got to ask yourself, when they're making these claims, are they getting paid to make these statements? How long are their trials? What's the size of the study group? Does it sound too good to be true? If it does, it probably is. So good science is never based off a single study, and the researchers, they get paid no matter what the results are. And often, I keep bumping this, sorry. If you have people that are getting paid to make statements, it can lead to undue bias. So very, very important that your researchers are objective. They're not paid based on results, that they're just paid to do objective work, and whatever the results are, those are what the results are. So those are some things to think about when you're looking at analyzing nutritional data, because we all see those advertisements for the latest drug or the latest pill, and did the FDA evaluate it, or are those statements been evaluated by any sort of government organization, or was the research done by a objective, non-biased university study, or did the company who's making the pill pay to do the study? So all those things are important to look at. Then finally, here, just to wrap up a little bit, we will talk about exercise too, because you need both a healthy diet and exercise. There are very specific things about even how your diet works that are influenced by exercise. So being physically fit makes it easier to maintain good nutrition health. There's actually evidence that certain things like, for example, when people talk about their cholesterol levels, I'm sure a lot of you have heard the terms good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. There is such a thing as good cholesterol and bad cholesterol, and good cholesterol is actually directly linked to how much you exercise. So you can't control that with diet. So you can do all these things to reduce your saturated fats, to reduce your cholesterol, but if you do want to increase your good cholesterol, you can't do that through diet. So very, very important to consider both a healthy diet and exercise in maintaining good health. Most important class ever. I always got to put this slide in here. Every instructor thinks that their class is the most important class in the world. But you could make a good argument that this is an important class. I mean, that this class really can impact the quality of your life, the length of your life. It's very hard to argue that if I can instill in you some good habits and recognize some good nutritional habits and exercise habits, and you apply those to your life, this might be the most important class ever. If I'm contributing to the overall quality of your life through this knowledge, I can make a good argument that this is the most important class you'll ever take. So just to kind of give you my expectations, my goal for you is that by the end of this course, you just have a better understanding of nutrition and exercise and how those things impact your health. I believe in free choice and personal choice, and everybody's got to make their own decisions. But I also believe that it's hard to do those things if we're not informed, if we're not educated. So my goal is to make sure you understand, what is a good diet, what is good nutrition, what are the consequences of both a poor diet or a healthy diet, and so that you can understand what those implications are of those choices that you're free to make, and then hopefully be able to make better choices. And again, my philosophy with a class like this is that I just don't see a lot of value in memorizing charts and data and graphs. If you want to know the specific obesity rate of the state of Mississippi in 2008, you can look that stuff up. Memorizing that stuff to me is a colossal waste of time. And really, all these government guidelines, some of you might remember, if you're nice and old like me, you might remember the 4 basic food groups. We used to have 4 basic food groups, and then they made a pyramid. And then they made a pyramid with a guy running up the side of it. And then, now they're to myfoodplate.org or something crazy, things like that. I can't stand those things because to me they're confusing, they're not easy to follow, and they're not meeting their goal. As we've changed these guidelines over the last couple decades, have we gotten any thinner? No. Have you seen people get in better shape? No. I want you to understand how the body works, what roles the different nutrients play, and why it's important to balance them all. Oopsie. Continue recording. Oops. I jumped ahead a little bit. There we go. So I want you to understand those roles of those nutrients and how our body processes those and why they're important, and what happens if you don't understand them. So I really just see the need for a basic understanding of the nutrients and where our pitfalls in our own personal eating come from, and making clear, logical steps to make lifetime changes for good health. No diets. Students ask me all the time, what do you think of this diet? What do you think of that diet? I always tell them, if you can do it for the next 50 years, I think it's a great idea. And most of them will say, well, I can't afford to take this supplement at $50 a month for my entire life. Well, then don't do it, because you're going to go back into your old habits and eventually go back to your old weight or your old routine or your old health challenges. So look for things that are sustainable. Look for things that you can really make into habits in your life, because those are the things that are going to carry you through. Anyone who's ever tried a diet has heard of yo-yo dieting, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later on, but there are reasons why people bounce back to their old habits when they go off a diet. Very physiological reasons. It's really not rocket science. So if you really want to be healthy long term, don't look at going on any sort of diet plan that you can't maintain for your lifetime. Don't make good small choices for better health. Lots of people that are unhappy with the way they look or unhappy with the way they feel didn't get there overnight. They didn't eat one pizza and become 300 pounds, or have one strawberry shake and now they can't get off the couch. It's little, small, bad choices over a long period of time that put you where you don't want to be. And it's really, truly little, small, good choices that will get you back where you want to go. So look at making logical, lifetime changes to your health and staying away from diets.